Hey guys, Shaky Maine, Deboo.com with a Deboo.com forecast update. This forecast update effective around 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, June 28th, 2017. And okay, we are 2 days away from closing the books on the month of June for the Eastern Pacific and Atlantic tropical cyclone season. The Eastern Pacific has gone one up on the Atlantic with the recent formation of Hurricane Dora. What's left over from Hurricane Dora down over here to the left-hand portion of your image, Dora becomes the first hurricane of either basin, the Eastern Pacific or the Atlantic, of the 2017 season. Now, the Atlantic has been keeping pace with the Eastern Pacific on named systems. The Atlantic looks to close out the month of June with Tropical Storm Cindy. Cindy developed down in here in the Gulf of Honduras, over the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, and up in here and made landfall in the northern Gulf of Mexico. Now, there are a couple of areas that we are watching. The rule of thumb during hurricane season is you always watch the tail ends of fronts or along stalled or dying fronts for an area of low pressure to develop. Now, if we go back and think about Cindy here, this is basically the same setup that we had with Cindy. Although models show no development, this does not mean that we won't continue to monitor this area. There is a tropical wave in here that is moving through here. Also, if you've been following us on our social feeds, you know we've been posting over the last 4 to 5 days that the pattern that was setting up over in the East Atlantic is known to produce tropical cyclones. Yesterday, NOAA came out with their global tropic hazards map for the next 2 weeks, confirming our call, showing a moderate risk of tropical cyclone development finishing out the end of June into the first week of July, and then going into the second week of July in here towards the Eastern Caribbean. Now, I want to switch you over to some visible satellite imagery and talk about climatology for just a few moments. If you followed our forecast on Tropical Storm Cindy, you know we talked about an area of spin getting in here off of Costa Rica and then rounding the corner into the Gulf of Honduras. And when we talk about this is the same type of pattern that we saw with Cindy, you can clearly see there's a little bit of spin in here in the Gulf of Honduras. There is some spin down in here off Costa Rica. And if you notice, it appears that a straight line appears in here. And so this is just an area we're watching. There's no convection developed, but we are in that time of year where homegrown development can occur. Now, when we go back and look at climatology, let's go back to the middle of June. And like we talked about, Cindy developing up in here, moving over the Yuc, and then making landfall in here in the northern Gulf of Mexico. We still can get development in here this time of year. But when we go into the second week of July, look what happens to the playing field. The playing field begins to stretch out. Not only do we have possibility of development here, Gulf of Honduras, Gulf of Mexico, off the southeast U.S. coast, but now we start to see first-time development out here towards the Eastern Caribbean and the first signs of Cape Verde season going into the second week of July. So what we're seeing in the imagery and in Climo appears to be right on time, right on schedule. When we start to look at the imagery, you can see now this is the infrared satellite imagery of the East Atlantic. Couple things to take note here. We've always talked about how upper level lows can help to induce tropical cyclone development. We have an upper level low that's spinning right in here, top left-hand portion of your screen. Now look over here towards your right. Here comes another upper-level low feature that's dropping into the main development region. And if you look down in here towards the tail end sections of these upper-level lows, you can see how this starts to create drag in here. And this starts to create lift. Well, what this also does is this also starts to create a backup in the Atlantic as these tropical waves move off Africa into the main development region. Now watch how this upper level low starts to spin in here, and then look down towards its tail. Notice how it starts to put a little wave in here in the intertropical convergence zone. This is what eventually is going to allow the next tropical wave that's moving off the African coast and give it lift and give it a chance to get above the 15 line. There's two things that we're going to be watching for. Upcoming forecast is lift in latitude and getting past the 50-60 long line where it gets away from the influence of the Saharan air layer and possibly get into a better, rich conditions for environmental conditions for development. Going to switch you over to the visible now. This is the visible satellite imagery. Apologize for the gray scale here, but watch right here. Here's this wave component that's moving off Africa. The idea is that this is going to additionally clear the Saharan air layer. But look, here's this upper level low right here. Watch right here. See how it's starting to dig down and it's moving off towards the west? And then look down here where it puts a little elbow right down in here in the bottom. And you see this little circle right here? So this flow is from the east to the west, and we're starting to see the cyclonic spin. Now, we can already see it setting up in the visible satellite imagery just east of the islands in here. If you look just north of Puerto Rico, there's another little upper level feature in here. So the flow is like this, right? And so the flow down here is from the east and off to the west, but through here, this upper level low is creating drag right in here on this corner. And again, that's what's starting to lead to a backup of the flow that's trying to come from the west to the east. Switch you over to last night's run, or excuse me, the 06Z model run of the GFS. This is at 10 days plus 240, guys. So this is Tropical Storm Dawn here east of the islands. And look at this other tropical wave starting to wrap up. This is inside of 10 days, guys, where confidence starts to increase. Here's the European model. The European model doesn't do very much with the first wave. Puts it in here, east of the islands in here. But look, the Euro showing another large tropical wave coming. And if the Atlantic has been keeping pace with the East Pacific, there is the outside shot that the Atlantic could be seeing the early formations of the first hurricane of the season. Lots of time to watch. That's all we got for you for now. Follow us on our social feeds for real-time updates. Nothing to worry about at this moment, but follow us on our social feeds. We'll keep you up to date, and we'll come back here to the website if something changes over the next 24 to 48 hours. Thanks for following.